breaking news story to tell you about. Apparently, a plane has just crashed into the World Trade Center here in New York City.
My wife was sitting in the living room watching TV, and she said, "A plane just hit the World Trade Center." My stomach just dropped.
Some reports are that it was a small commuter plane crashed into the upper floors of one of the Twin Towers.
And I saw the amount of smoke coming from the tower, and I knew it wasn't a commuter plane.
I believe a commercial jet has crashed into one of the towers of the World Trade Center.
We were in Malaysia, and we're watching this, and then the second plane flies in.
Oh, another one just hit. A very large plane just flew directly over my building.
I mean, we knew right away what it was.
Flashes went through my head, and the name popped up right away.
And I thought it was him. Can't believe he did that.
This looks like it is some sort of a concerted effort to attack the World Trade Center that is underway.
While I was trying to process what I'm seeing happening in front of me, my phone rang, and it was Frank.
I had to call Matt and tell him, look what they did it. It was the Trade Center bombing from '93.
Ramzi Youssef, convicted of being the mastermind of the World Trade Center bombing,
And it was the Bojinka plot from '95.
It involved leaving bombs on U.S. airliners, creating 11 catastrophes on one day.
Well, they put those two ideas together to use the plane as an actual weapon. There was a natural progression to 9/11.
Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. There is smoke pouring out of the Pentagon.
What a bad feeling to think that it was the guy. We had been investigating for years. He was my responsibility. I just wanted to hide under my desk.
And we both just sat on the phone together and we were just crying. After we finished our conversation, my wife came in and I said, "I told you these bastards are coming back."
September 11th was an attack decades in the making. Now, the complete story. How and why it happened. 60 interviews from the CIA, FBI, the White House, and those who knew the terrorists. On this, the road to 9/11. In the wake of 9/11, an urgent search for answers. Who planned the attacks? Will they strike again? CIA and FBI agents scatter across the globe, chasing leads. One of the most tantalizing, a bin Laden tape recorded after 9/11 and found in November 2001 in Afghanistan.
The tape was found at the military committee of Al-Qaeda in Kandahar. It included Osama bin Laden sitting with a paraplegic mullah, talking about the plot, saying how nobody was that optimistic that the whole building will fall down. Throughout the conversation, he kept pointing at this guy and saying, "Mukhtar, Mukhtar." And he appeared to point at the person who is either holding the camera or sitting close to the person who's holding the camera. Later on the same video, you see bin Laden's son running away. He yells, "Mukhtar, Mukhtar, come and see this." And then you see the camera coming.
FBI agent Ali Soufan grasps one thing instantly. This name, Mukhtar, matters. Now he has to figure out why.
We were really trying to identify that Mukhtar. Who's that Mukhtar?
For Soufan and his partner, FBI agent Steve Godden, answering that question starts with a man named Abu Zubaydah.
Abu Zubaydah was a terrorist facilitator. He worked very closely with Al-Qaeda.
We knew Zubaydah was a bit of a gatekeeper who assisted people getting from wherever they were in the world to Pakistan and then into the training camps, and then after they were done, back into Pakistan, and then out into the world to do whatever they were tasked to do.
In 2002, Zubaydah is captured in Pakistan.
There was some sort of gun battle that had happened during the raid to capture him, and a number of the Pakistani forces were killed, and Zubaydah was seriously wounded in the operation.
He had a bullet in his stomach. He wasn't, he wasn't doing good.
The CIA transports the gravely injured Zubaydah to a black site in Thailand, where he is interrogated by Gordon and Soufan.
The foremost urgency is trying to stop any terrorist attack that he knows of. That is our #1 goal.
We told him who we were. I'm Steve Gordon, this is Ali Soufan, we're from the FBI, and we're here to get information out of you.
Zubaydah seems willing to cooperate, but first, doctors have to save his life.
We needed him alive. He can't have a lot of water because of his stomach wound, but Ali is taking a sponge and moistening his lips. He's reading to him parts of the Quran to try to keep him calm and basically say, don't worry about anything, brother. We're gonna take care of you.
The prisoner revives. Soufan and Gordon resume the interrogation.
Now we gotta get back to business. We gotta start asking him some questions. We wanna prevent the next 9/11, the next attack. I had the wanted posters of the FBI's 22 most wanted terrorists. And I'm like, look, we're gonna show you some pictures. You may know some of these people, you may know none of them.
The point of this exercise, to test Zubaydah's truthfulness. If he correctly identifies the people they ask him to, they'll know he's telling the truth, and they can move on to other, more pressing questions.
And about somewhere in the middle, a picture of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed comes up. He hits on the photo of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and grabs my arm. I only know Khalid Sheikh Mohammed because he's a very central figure in the Bojinka plot and the first World Trade Center case. He's Ramzi Yousef's uncle. And he's giving me this funny look. I was like, what, you think I don't know who Ramzi Yousef's uncle is? And he goes, but Steve, how did you know Mukhtar was the mastermind of 9/11? And Ali and I are looking at each other going, what did we just stumble into? He is saying Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is Mukhtar.
For months, the U.S. has been pouring resources into trying to find Osama bin Laden. Yet in this moment, Soufan and Gordon realized this harrowing truth. 9/11 was not the brainchild of bin Laden, but of someone just as dangerous.
It was like a light bulb that went on. Mukhtar equal Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, equal a member of Al-Qaeda, equal the planner of 9/11. That is a big, big revelation. That was the moment in time we actually identified the mastermind of 9/11.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has gone largely unnoticed by the intelligence community for years, except for one determined investigator who has targeted KSM all along.
Frank Pellegrino has been running all over the world for a long time trying to find Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. That's Frank's guy.
Long before 9/11, FBI agent Frank Pellegrino and his partner, Port Authority cop Matthew Bashir, had been hunting Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. A seemingly unremarkable money transfer ignites a first suspicion.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed sent money to Ramzi back in November of 1992.
It was the money transfer of approximately $600 from Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to Ramzi Yousef that initially heightened his name to our attention.
Ramzi Yousef, the mastermind of the first World Trade Center bombing, is the nephew of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
But he could have sent the money just so his nephew could eat. The fact that he was a family member doesn't make him guilty of anything.
But then the name Khalid Sheikh Mohammed turns up in an unexpected place.
And some of this evidence that we had, we saw the name pop up on the computer.
Ramzi Youssef's computer, the same computer that held the blueprint to a plot codenamed Bojinka. The Bojinka plot was a 9/11-style attack planned in 1995. Terrorists schemed to blow up 12 passenger jets en route to the United States. The plot was eventually intercepted and Ramzi Youssef arrested. But on his computer, authorities uncovered the names of those who had planned the attack. And it was clear that Youssef's uncle was the main architect. Now, to save lives, Pellegrino and Bashir must find him before he carries out his next attack.
This was not the type of investigation where you could put a drone up or you could rely on electronic surveillance. You have to get out into the street, you got to pound that pavement. Our travels took us to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, Bangkok, Thailand.
We went to the Philippines,
Johannesburg, South Africa,
Madagascar,
Cape Town, South Africa. I lost track at 21 or 22 trips.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is a ghost, always one step ahead.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed has the ability to appear in one country, and just as we're building information on him in that country, he's all of a sudden someplace else. He kept appearing and then disappearing. He would look like a businessman one day, he would look like an Arab sheik the next. He was a chameleon.
The costumes change, but the evidence trail continues to lead back to the Philippines. Here, the agents dig through records, trying to determine their target's next move.
When we'd go to these hotels, we'd go down to the basement, and the Philippines is rather hot and steamy, and then when you get into a basement, it's even more hot and steamy, and there'd be piles upon piles of sign-in cards. When you first come to the hotel, you sign a card. We would be sitting in the basement, going through stacks upon stacks of these cards with huge roaches crawling all over us and all over everything, until we would come across a card with a known alias or the name of one of our targets.
Filipino call girls who partied with Youssef and KSM in the early 90s also turn out to be invaluable sources.
They were not involved in what Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Ramzi were doing, but they held bank accounts for them.
I've always been a believer that you get more with honey than you do with vinegar, and especially with some of these girls, I mean, you just be nice to them.
And by gaining confidence and trust, they turned over to us banking records, which showed transfers of money, which aided in the investigation.
By January of 1996, Bashir and Pellegrino have gathered enough evidence against KSM to indict him on 7 counts of terror conspiracy for his involvement in the Bojinka plot. Now they have to find him. A few months after the indictment, Bashir and Pellegrino uncover a critical lead, a stack of letters written to one of the Filipino girls by Khalid Sheikh Mohammed himself.
He whited out the return address on these envelopes. We sent the envelopes down to the lab. They were able to take off the whiteout, and it came back to Qatar.
The tiny Middle Eastern state of Qatar.
At that point, we knew that that was probably his home base.
The year is 1996. FBI agent Frank Pellegrino and Port Authority cop Matthew Bashir have been on the trail of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed for the past year. A 2-man team with a noticeable rapport.
Frank was the dogged investigator, and I was the detail guy. He was the alpha on the team. Many people in the office would refer to us as Batman and Robin, and I had no problem being Robin. at all.
As the younger guy, I probably should have been around. He's much older than me.
A cache of letters in the Philippines leads FBI agent Frank Pellegrino to the Middle Eastern country of Qatar. It's a real opportunity to corner Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. But finding him turns out to be easier than snatching him.
We in the White House asked the FBI if they could put together a team to go out and arrest him. They said they couldn't do that without the permission or cooperation of the local government. We asked the CIA if they could do that. And the CIA said no, they couldn't do it either because they had no on-the-ground capability.
Under the circumstances, the only way to get Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is for the United States government to ask Qatar for a favor. U.S. Ambassador Patrick Theros gets the job.
I was asked to go to the Qatari government and say, we've identified this person, we believe he's involved in a terrorist action, and we would like you to give him to us. But there was no extradition treaty, there was no agreement. In Qatar, we had a brand new relationship with a relatively new government that had just taken over.
Local authorities were a little bit concerned of having their fingerprints on actually helping us. Not that they were unwilling, but they didn't want it to be overt.
Negotiations continue in secret, and Pellegrino waits for the signal to move.
We were ready to pick him up, and we had a plane ready. It was in Oman at the Air Force Base there. But we weren't allowed to go to any meetings with the locals. They'd come back and give us an update. It was frustrating not to be able to go to let them know how we felt about it and how important it was.
Days pass. Nothing happens. Theros is not making any progress in the negotiations.
I never thought the ambassador quite understood the importance of picking Khalid Sheikh Mohammed up.
Until then, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had not gotten on my screen at all.
The ambassador would always downplay the whole thing, at one point actually asking me if the indictment was really that important.
I had no reason to have noticed him or even to think that he was important. If anybody in Washington felt that he was a major player at the time, they never told me.
Pellegrino is one of a handful of law enforcement agents who understand the gravity of the moment. The chance to grab a terrorist with staggering, horrifying ambitions. In an instant, that chance is gone.
Well, we thought the Qatari government was pretty well infiltrated with sympathizers for the al-Qaeda movement, and that turned out to be true.
Someone tipped off Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. At that point, I guess he realized he was being hunted.
I was informed that he was no longer there.
He was gone.
I couldn't believe it. A country the size of, I don't know, Rhode Island, and you lose the guy? How could you lose the guy? I was furious. I uttered some questionable comments at the ambassador. I think I called him a mother.
When I received word that Frank's efforts to capture Khalid Sheikh Mohammed in Qatar had fallen through, it devastated me.
Could we have done something different? We could always have done something different. But no one in Washington communicated to me that I had just presided over a major disaster in the American counterterrorism effort.
9/11 was Khalid's invention. So when you look at it through the 9/11 lens, you look at it as a real missed opportunity.
We saw it as tragic then, and obviously not knowing as much about KSM as we were all later to learn. He'd escaped the net, and we had the net there.
By 1998, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is considered by the U.S. government to be one of the most dangerous men on the planet. But who is this ghost of international terrorism who will one day mastermind the 9/11 plot? The answer doesn't lead to the Middle East, but surprisingly, to Greensboro, North Carolina, where KSM attended college.
Khalid, he was a man with honor. He was like a son. He was like a star.
At North Carolina Agricultural and Technical State University, KSM befriends Badi Ali in the 1980s.
He used to attract people, someone who can influence your thoughts and your emotions, your brain and your heart. He was that guy.
He could definitely pull people in who might not be as strong-willed as others, that he could pull them into things.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was part of a 1980s wave of Middle Eastern students moving to the United States to pursue engineering degrees.
Most of the students who came from Kuwait, they were pursuing mechanical engineering or electrical engineering. It was a trend. Then after that, they want to go back to Kuwait so they can become effective in the Kuwaiti society by being actually agents of change.
Many of these young students find it hard to adapt to life in the United States.
Obviously, going to North Carolina from Kuwait is quite a difference, which probably why they tended to stick together as a group. It's quite a culture change.
Under the umbrella, the Islamic Group of Greensboro, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and Badi Ali organize over 100 Muslim students from across the Middle East, all of them dealing with similar challenges of adjusting to life in the United States.
We used to discuss faith, how to deal with the weakness of faith, how to actually survive in this society. We used to have a lot of activities. We were actually a very active group. I think to some extent social life was important to all of us because we were strangers here, we were foreigners here. So being together was something we all needed. Khalid struggled more simply because he was more faithful. He was not liberal in that aspect. He was very conservative. He was a practicing Muslim with all his heart.
He was among that group that wouldn't drink beer, they wouldn't have girlfriends, they wouldn't go to clubs, they wouldn't go to bars. No way. Anything prohibited by religion, they wouldn't do.
We all face challenges, the language, the culture, being foreign. So it took time, actually, for us to adapt.
It's a completely different culture. What's wrong to you is right for me, or what's right for me could be wrong for you.
That culture shock left its mark on Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, but did it play some role on the road to 9/11?
We don't really know how his anger took root, how much of it was political, how much of it was ego. You get these stories of young Muslim men raised in the tradition of the Muslim Brotherhood. Then they come to the United States, they confront a society that they've never experienced before, where women are dancing openly with men, where Christianity is omnipresent.
Long before he came to the United States, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed already knew the story of another Muslim who made the same journey 4 decades earlier, in 1948. The experience of post-war America in all its glory, power, and lust shocked the Egyptian writer Saeed Qutb.
He was like an exchange student. He was studying the American educational system. And he actually wrote an essay, What I Saw in America. And his essay actually tells you a lot about him and his hang-ups. He goes on and on about the high school dance where the young teenage boys and girls were hugging each other and groping each other, and the adults just stood there and thought that was fine. Qutb goes into a lot of detail on the physical form of the female students. I mean, he was really paying attention, close attention to what's going on. But there's a deeper issue here, which is he just believed Western society was fundamentally immoral. And these people represent a threat to us and our morals because they are promoting their way of thinking and their way of acting through movies, through music, through the media.
A 32-year-old would-be assassin is brought to Cairo's military jail.
Back in Egypt, Qutb becomes part of a plot to kill the Egyptian president Gamal Abdel Nasser and goes to prison in 1954. There he writes dozens of books that will inspire the next generation of jihadists, especially an organization known as the Muslim Brotherhood.
The history of terrorism started in Egypt by creating the Muslim Brotherhood as a political religious organization, and they used violence to convey their message.
It's a politicized form of Islam. The idea that you should have a vanguard of Muslims who are highly indoctrinated and ideologically motivated to produce a form of Islam that is political and that can stand up to the challenges of the West.
It is this organization that will educate the mastermind of 9/11 long before he goes to the United States, encouraging suspicion and fear of the American experience.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed became politically aware and committed as a teenager in the Muslim Brotherhood before he went to the United States. It may be that the United States offended him and confirmed the beliefs that he had been taught, but thousands and thousands of similarly situated Muslim men come to the United States, confront a different kind of culture, and they never blow anything up.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed takes the Muslim Brotherhood education of his childhood and his experience of America to Afghanistan, which proves to be the turning point in his career as a terrorist.
He felt compelled, like a lot of Muslims did at that time, to go help in Afghanistan. When he got involved more in the fighting, that's when he became more radicalized, and as a lot of people did.
His former classmate still has a hard time understanding how his brilliant friend Khalid Sheikh Mohammed ended up as the mastermind of 9/11.
This guy could have got the Nobel Prize if he used his knowledge in a good way. Normally, when you do something big in that magnitude that changes the whole world, you will get a Nobel Prize if it was good. But unfortunately, it was in the wrong way.
In 2002, 8 months after he successfully executed the 9/11 attacks, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is still at large. He's a phantom, unknown to most of the world, when an Al Jazeera journalist in London gets a call from a stranger.
He was wondering if I was thinking of marking the first anniversary. He didn't even mention what anniversary, but at the time, there was only one anniversary coming up, 9/11.
The caller knows that Yasri Fouda is one of the most prominent television journalists in the Arab world.
He said, we can provide you with something exclusive, something top secret. I was just thinking that maybe he's a go-between, maybe he is Al-Qaeda, I have no idea.
The offer is mysterious. Fouda must travel without camera equipment to Islamabad, Pakistan, where he will be met by an intermediary.
I know that I'm taking a big risk, but these are one of the moments that you have to decide as an investigative journalist whether or not you are willing to take a risk. I took a flight down to Pakistan. I booked myself into a hotel. And then, like half an hour later, somebody was knocking on my door. And then he came in, and he's someone who knows, people within Al-Qaeda, and he was going to take me to some of the brothers.
Fouda is blindfolded, driven to an undisclosed location.
I felt I was going upstairs, and then a door opens, and then the blindfolds are taken away. And there I was in front of Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. At the time, we didn't really know much. This guy was most wanted, with a big chunk of cash on his head. And he was involved in the first attack on the World Trade Center. But we have no idea about his true role when it comes to 9/11. I felt very much like having a cigarette, but I knew what they would think of that. So I gingerly approached them and I said, would it be possible? I know that it's bad and I shouldn't do it. Would it just, if I can step out in the balcony and have a smoke? Immediately, someone said, brother Yusuf, you smoke. I'm so disappointed, you shouldn't do it, and stuff like that. It was actually Khalid Sheikh Mohammed who said, I take it easy on that guy, he can smoke. That's Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. He doesn't really mind whether or not this is against the values of Islam or decency or whatever. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed wasn't a man of Allah, but rather he was a man of action. For me as a journalist, I was wondering whether or not, as they promised that they have something exclusive for me, top secret, as they said, and that they delivered. To my absolute surprise, KSM said, I'm the head of the military committee for Al-Qaeda, and I am the one behind 9/11.
To Fouda, this is an astonishing revelation.
That was the very first time that Al-Qaeda say, we were behind 9/11, we did it. Then it was one surprise after the other until you cease to be surprised anymore. And KSM was the one who was actually taking initiative, telling me about how the plan developed from an idea, how they recruited for it, how they financed it, how they saw it through until the very end. The kind of character that KSM has, there's no way that someone like him would execute a gigantic plan like this without trying to announce to the world that it's me who did it. He enjoyed taking credit for it.
Fouda now possesses the complete roadmap to 9/11. The plan first taking shape in 1996 when Khalid Sheikh Mohammed pitched the idea to bin Laden. 5 years from inception to the day of the attack.
Bin Laden and Khalid Sheikh Mohammed were both international figures. They'd both traveled to the United States. They were both educated. Bin Laden had experience with building construction. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed had studied engineering and then bomb making informally in the Philippines and elsewhere. But the most important thing they had in common was that they could imagine a crime on this scale. According to the best accounts we have, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed approached him in Afghanistan and started to talk with him about his ideas that were born from the Bojinka plot in Manila and from past ideas involving attacks on aviation. And he had a grand, almost Hollywood vision of how this attack could be carried out.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed was always fascinated by the aeroplanes idea. He likes to show off. Khalid Sheikh Mohammed told me that those 4 flights, they were part of a bigger operation involving also other flights that would have hit the western coast of the United States.
He had as many as 9 hijackings in mind originally. We'll strike tall buildings, we'll strike seats of government, we'll strike a nuclear power plant, and then the last plane will land on an airport tarmac in the United States, and I'll get out and hold a press conference. And bin Laden wasn't especially interested in Khalid Sheikh Mohammed being the star of the show, and asked him to scale it back. And it was in the editing process that they kind of came down to the idea of a smaller number of hijacked planes concentrated on New York and Washington. So this is where September 11th's specific vision begins.
The chair proudly announces George W. Bush of Texas!
It is autumn 2000, an election year.
It is the time to break down barriers and write history.
In a tight race for president, terrorism plays almost no role.
Proudly accept your nomination.
I ask for your vote. I ask for your enthusiasm.
Then, on October 12th,
Our top story this hour, word coming into the CNN Center of an explosion that has rocked the USS Cole, which is a destroyer that was on a routine refueling mission in Aden, off the coast of Yemen. In the Middle East, we understand that
the blast cuts a gash in the steel hull more than 40 feet across.
We had a very good feeling that it was most probably an Al-Qaeda operation.
FBI agent Ali Soufan, who has been chasing Osama bin Laden for years, is one of the first U.S. agents to arrive on the scene.
The moment you go in, you see the carnage. We had 17 sailors murdered, and these bodies have been there for more than a day. And it was 100 degrees. You can imagine the smell that was coming out. And that smell will stay with you forever, that smell of death. That was a very difficult moment. We said we really need to bring the murderers to justice.
Soufan and his team quickly traced the attack to an Al-Qaeda cell operating in Yemen.
I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
But 7,000 miles from the port of Aden, an incoming administration seems indifferent to the looming threat.
One of the administration's first reactions was, why is the counterterrorism operation here so big?
They had not heard of Al-Qaeda, many of them. They'd only heard of bin Laden. They didn't know how big the organization was. They didn't know that it posed a major threat to the United States. It was very disturbing to see the reaction. They looked at us like we were crazy. They really thought we were a little nuts.
Not even Richard Clarke grasps how far along the plot has already progressed. A year before President Bush enters office, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is staffing up. The key to success? Finding the right people to execute his vision. That means pilots.
For Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, the problem was not where to find enough people to take part in the operation. His main problem, as he told me, was to find the right ones to take part.
The mastermind of 9/11 finds his ideal candidates in the most unlikely of places. In the German port city of Hamburg. Ramzi Ben al-Shib from Yemen, Marwan al-Shehi from the United Arab Emirates, Zia Jarrah from Lebanon, and Mohammed Atta of Egypt. All four moved to Germany in the 1990s. Two of them in particular have bright prospects.
Mohammed Atta and Zia Jarrah both came from middle class They both had a rosy future in front of them.
Atta and Jarrah are students at the Technical University at Hamburg-Harburg.
Ziad Jarrah was very much into life. He had a girlfriend. He drank beer. But you look at someone like Mohammed Atta, for instance, he was a very good boy, a student, but was rather to himself. I don't think that Mohammed Atta really gave himself the opportunity to integrate within the society.
Where Mohammed Atta really excels is in the classroom.
Und sehr interessiert immer in der ersten Reihe zuhörte. Diplomarbeit geschrieben, also die ich betreut habe, und war ein Student, in den ich Hoffnungen setzte. Muss ich ganz ehrlich sagen, große Hoffnung.
Working against these hopes, another force, the Al-Quds Mosque. In the 1990s, Al-Quds Mosque was a center for incendiary views. Mohammed Haydar Zamar called for violent jihad.
There was that kind of mosque, which actually was a venue to talk about the political situation in the Middle East, corrupt leaders, calling for jihad.
Not many details are known about exactly how the members of the Hamburg cell were recruited to Al-Qaeda. But what we do know is where it happened. The Al-Quds Mosque. Atta stops attending classes for a time. And when he returns, his professor wants to know where he's been.
Sag mal, Mohammed, wo warst du denn? Was ist denn? Ja, ich war zu Hause. Ich musste zu meinen Eltern, zu meinen Schwestern. Ja, wieso? Dring nicht länger in mich ein, frag nicht weiter. Im Nachhinein sagt man sich natürlich, da hätte man bohren müssen.
Atta was not, in fact, visiting family. He was in Afghanistan with al-Shehi, Jarrah, and bin al-Shib.
We think that likely that was their first time in Afghanistan. We believe there they met with bin Laden. And were chosen for the 9/11 operation. The fact that they were chosen that quickly to be the major piece of the biggest operation Al-Qaeda ever pulled off tells you about their personalities.
The Hamburg cell had experience living in Western society. They apparently had English language skills. So given those characteristics, they were selected to participate in the operation.
After meeting with bin Laden several times, they were deployed out into Pakistan, where we believe they met with Khalid Sheikh Mohammed to get further details about what to do.
A videotape surfaced later of both Mohammed Atta and Ziad Jarrah. Obviously, they had already been recruited, and time had come for them to record the video well.
Mohammed Atta and Ziad Jarrah filmed their what is known as martyr videos, so that's a pretty good indication that they knew what they were headed for and that they knew they had been selected for a suicide operation.
أمريكا هي الشر الأعظم في العالم، وهي تدير الأمور وراء المحيطات حيث الجسم. تضرب الرأس وليس ضرب الذيل. عندما نستطيع أن نضرب الرأس لا نتأخر، وإن شاء الله رب العالمين ينصرنا. والحمد لله.
Prepared to give their lives as hand-picked soldiers in a war against the United States, the four men returned to Germany, where they follow strict orders issued to them by their recruiter, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed.
Right from when they got back, they all reported their passports stolen so they can get clean passports that did not have the markings from Pakistan, Afghanistan. Applied for U.S. visas, shaved their beards, became more westernized, and then come to the United States to start their training.
But in the summer of 2001, the American public fears a very different kind of assault.
This 200-plus-pound shark ripped off the arm of 8-year-old Jesse Arbogast.
On 4th of July weekend, a young boy is mauled by a shark, launching weeks of fevered coverage. American beaches as threat zones, bull sharks as terrorists.
2 more people, also in Florida, have been attacked by sharks.
6 people bitten by sharks just this weekend. 18-year-old Tim Flanagan, the 16th attack.
The summer of 2001 is quickly dubbed the Summer of the Shark.
The 50 shark attacks reported worldwide, 39 are in the United States.
At the White House, Richard Clarke sees the shadow of a far more terrifying menace.
Well, there was a lot of intelligence coming in that suggested al-Qaeda was planning something big somewhere. That al-Qaeda was, in fact, trying to kill large numbers of Americans.
The volume of reporting indicating an al-Qaeda intention to carry out a serious attack was of such a magnitude that you could not fail to notice it. The system was blinking red.
Summer 2001. A crescendo of intelligence indicates that an al-Qaeda attack on the U.S. is imminent. Just after July 4th, CIA analysts turn up disturbing new information.
The reporting shows al-Qaeda operatives moving, leaving their bases. It shows preparation for attacks directed at the United States, either at a facility overseas or somewhere in the homeland. That was a tipping point in the thinking of our counterterrorism specialists, and they showed up in George Tenet's office. And George, who was a very decisive guy, picked up the phone on his desk that connected him to the White House and said to Condi Rice, "We need to come and see you right now." She cleared her calendar, to her credit, and George and several people jumped in a car and raced down there.
Dick Clark went through the masthead of what the intelligence said. They're expecting 8 attacks to go off. It's going to be, a world-class event. And this is real, and their objective is the destruction of the United States. After this, Condi Rice turned to Dick and said, "Dick, do you agree?" And Dick put his head between his 2 hands and put his elbows on his knees and shook his head and said, "Yes." She turned to me and said, "Cofer, what do we do?" I said in a very loud voice, "This country's got to go on a war footing now." And then I used my fist and slammed the table. And she said, "Okay." Afterwards, we congratulated each other in the sense that we'd finally gotten through to these people.
Our people went away from that meeting with a sense that something would occur as a result of it, something that would be useful in thwarting the attacks. As it turned out, not much really changed as a result of that meeting.
Despite warnings from top CIA and FBI officials, the White House, the President, and the Cabinet do not act. Stephen Hadley is Condoleezza Rice's deputy.
When Cofer Black, who's with the intelligence community, says we ought to be on a war footing, and when intelligence community all the time comes in and says, "Mr. President, there's a threat," the question then becomes, okay, what are you recommending we do about it? That's the question. And I don't think we ever got a real answer for that.
For those sounding the alarm, the sense of threat intensifies. At the CIA Counterterrorism Center, Cynthia Storer and her colleagues frantically sift through clues.
Basically, none of us had a life. By that time, I had come fully into panic mode along with everybody else. Not panic so you can't work, but really, really scared that we weren't going to be able to stop whatever it was. We were trying to get the policymakers to understand that al-Qaeda was about to up their game.
August 6th, President Bush is on vacation in Crawford, Texas. He's hearing about episodically the reporting we have about an attack. And he says, "Can you bring me up to date on this? Where do we stand on all of this?"
We wrote a President's Daily Brief entitled "Bin Laden Determined to Strike in U.S."
Barbara Sood was the principal author.
That President's Daily Brief stressed their intent is definitely to attack. They have the capability, and there's mysterious stuff going on right now, but we don't know what it all means.
It says in one paragraph that bin Laden probably has an infrastructure of sorts here. It notes that there have been observations of terrorists doing casing and surveillance of federal buildings in New York. So it is a very alarming report.
Everybody was talking about something's going on, trying to figure out how to stop it, trying to figure out how to connect the bits. It was just this feeling that I almost don't even know how to describe it. It's like the sky is going to fall and we can't stop it.
I don't remember a time in a 32-year career when I felt every day like we were dealing with a ticking time bomb scenario. We could not define the method, the timing, but we could feel it coming.
In the summer of 2001, the American intelligence community feels an increasing sense of threat from a terrorist attack. Despite working around the clock, agents can't seem to figure out the when and where. But a handful of CIA operatives have been sitting on critical information, failing to share it with the FBI. They've known about 2 al-Qaeda members with U.S. visas, Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Mihdhar, who could have key information about this potential attack.
We discovered they're going to Kuala Lumpur. In Kuala Lumpur, we did some surveillance and we discovered that they are meeting with other al-Qaeda operatives.
The CIA didn't know what the meeting was about, but the presence of several al-Qaeda members in the same place set off alarm bells. The CIA surveilled from a distance. After the meeting in January 2000, al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi left Malaysia.
These 2 people then go to Bangkok. And at some point, they leave Bangkok and come to the United States. They have U.S. visas.
For reasons unknown, the CIA does not place al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi on the terrorist watch list. The 2 men now settle in San Diego.
A cable came in from the Malaysia station that spoke about the arrival of Khalid al-Mihdhar and other terrorists into the U.S.
FBI agent Mark Rossini and his colleague Doug Miller are deployed at Alex Station, the CIA's bin Laden bureau in Northern Virginia. When they learn that 2 known al-Qaeda figures have arrived in the U.S., Miller quickly writes up a cable for his supervisors at FBI headquarters.
In the CIA, everything is electronic. There's no paper, okay? And when you write any cable, you have an electronic queue of people that you know that it's got to go to this person, that person, that person, for them to sign off on it and check the box. And then eventually, it goes out the door, and it goes to who it was directed to, obviously in this case, the FBI. So Doug puts on the list of people to sign off on it, me the first, and then it goes to the person after me. Okay. And it sits there for about, I think like a day or 2. So Doug says, hey, my cable's not moving out of so-and-so's cable queue. Could you find out what's going on? And I go to this person's desk. Hey, Doug's cable, what's going on? You're not sending it. No, we're not going to send it. Well, why not? It's CIA information.
Rossini and Miller have stumbled across an old story in American intelligence. A firewall spanning decades. The refusal to share data between 2 rival agencies.
The CIA is supposed to stay out of domestic spying, and the FBI is in charge of keeping track of domestic radicals. And there was a long tradition of rivalry between the 2 agencies. There were not laws that encouraged them to cooperate. The problem was that these terrorism networks were crossing borders, so they were challenging the stovepiped American system. It was difficult for the CIA and the FBI to cooperate fluidly as people they were targeting crossed borders.
In this case, neglecting to share information would go on to become one of the costliest missed signals on the road to 9/11.
After 9/11, what we put together circumstantially was discussed at the meeting in Malaysia was the planning and assignment given to Nawaf Hamzi and Khalid Midhar. Go to the U.S. and await further instruction. You're going to be part of something big.
Nawaf al-Hazmi and Khalid al-Midhar have settled into their lives in San Diego. Now they wait. And in June 2000, members of the Hamburg cell start to arrive. Ziad Jarrah, Mohammed Atta, and Marwan al-Shehi travel from Germany to a sleepy town on Florida's west coast, a place of airstrips called Venice.
Flying in the US is awesome. You have a lot of freedom. You have a lot of instructor airports all around the place, so it's a lot easier. So you can have your entire training.
We train people from all over the world, Spain, Italy, England, people from the Middle East, so having an international crowd wasn't really a big deal to us. It was just the norm.
In Venice, Atta, Jarrah, and al-Shehi all sign up for flying lessons. Atta and al-Shehi at Huffman Aviation.
A chief pilot had introduced me to Mr. Atta, and he was assigned to me as a primary flight student. Mohammed Atta would come in, and he would be dressed in easily $200 shoes, silk pants, and silk shirt, so he was obviously dressed for the nines. He was an educated individual. He spoke proper English. But I would say he was very cold. The way he treated other people was not kind. Al-Shehi was a different kind of cat. He was quiet, he was friendly, he would smile, he would interact, but he wouldn't really take it much further than that.
Having left his girlfriend in Hamburg with the impression that he was fulfilling a lifelong dream of becoming a pilot, Ziad Jarrah enrolls in the neighboring Florida Flight Training Center. Once he begins class, he immediately makes an impression on his instructors.
He was a good student, pleasant, very social. We could joke very easily and about almost everything. We had no boundaries. It was easy.
Ziad Jarrah spent a total of 7 or 8 months here. When I met him, I was very much impressed with this young man. He spoke fluent German, fluent English, and I think he even spoke French.
Not long after meeting, Jarrah shows up at his teacher's house unannounced.
Ziad Jarrah came to my house after I had knee surgery. He knocked on the door, came inside. He started a conversation, brought me something to drink and flowers. He even came before any of my colleagues to see if I was doing okay.
It was the beginning of a friendship that would last until September 11th, 2001.
You know, there's these people in life that look at something and you make that eye contact, and you both have exactly the same thoughts. I felt that with him.
Atta made a far different impression.
5 times that I flew with him, he wasn't really a very quick learner at all. He had trouble getting basically past the second lesson, which was basic altitude. It was tough for him, and it was very frustrating to him. So he got upset, he got mad, and he went and complained to my chief pilot. And basically after the 5th flight, that was it. He was given to somebody else. The instructor over there said all he wanted to do was fly straight and level, and did he want to learn to fly? No. The fact that he only wanted to learn how to basically maybe take off or just fly it straight and level was kind of odd.
Odd, perhaps, but not illegal. No one imagines the worst. No alarms go off. To his instructors, Ziad Jarrah shows real promise.
We all saw him as a very successful future aviator.
He was a pretty decent pilot. He had a good background, so the ground school was very easy for him.
He did most of the training towards the commercial license. But at the time, our twin engine was down for maintenance, and he waited a couple of weeks, and then it was still not repaired. So he left the school.
What Jarrah does next baffles his flight school teachers. Transferring to Miami, he trains in a flight simulator used for pilots flying jets at high altitudes. Instruction that does not include takeoffs or landings.
Yeah, that doesn't make sense to the training. That didn't fit in with the curriculum at all. Well, it's not the correct step. You're not even completed with your training in order to go to the next phase.
Once Atta and Al-Shehhi got their private pilot license, they jumped to another flight school. For the most part, they just hopped from flight school to flight school until they got what they wanted out of the flight school. And, you know, I heard they even went over to a simulator flight school.
No word comes for months from Jarrah, until one day he shows up, hand in hand with his girlfriend.
I spoke to her for quite some time. She was very proud of Ziad. You could see the two young lovers. They said they were going to get married together. We asked him, are you going to finish your license? And he said, right now I'm just here with my girl that I wanted to introduce, but I will come back to finish up. And that was the last time we saw him.
By 2001, 5 9/11 hijackers, Atta, Jarrah, Al-Shehhi, Al-Hazmi, and Al-Midar, have all settled in the U.S. The details of how they spent their last months, weeks, and days in the U.S. were pieced together by investigators after 9/11. FBI agents Adam Drucker and Jackie McGuire were part of that team.
The hijackers spent a lot of time in the U.S., and they really operated under the radar. They acted like any other person living here. Nawaf Al-Hazmi actually felt so comfortable in the U.S. that when he lived in Northern Virginia, he was mugged, and he actually called the police and filed a police report.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's plot is developing as planned. And in the spring of 2001, more key players arrive.
We look at the hijackers in two different groups. We have the pilot hijackers, who were in control of the flight, who had taken flight training lessons. And then we have the muscle hijackers, the non-pilots.
Their job was to take control of the airplane as quickly as possible, so the pilots can get to the cockpit and take over the airplane. The muscle hijackers are arriving in April of 2001. They arrived in groups of mostly 2s and 3s. Once they arrived, they stayed in place for the most part.
In August, the hijackers purchased plane tickets, showing special preference for a single date, Tuesday, September 11th.
The hijackers had to coordinate their ticket purchases before they even got to the U.S. KSM had taught them how to read flight schedules, how to coordinate the flight times to make sure that the different flights they were going to be on were going to be in the air at the same time.
All the booked flights are scheduled to take off around 8 a.m. on September 11th, 2001. In Washington, there's an overwhelming sense an attack is coming. On August 23, 2001, CIA officials send a bulletin to the FBI about 2 men they've just added to the terrorist watch list.
The FBI in New York is requested to find Khalid al-Midhar, Nawaf Al-Hazmi. Routine, not with any urgency. Find the following guys. This is his name, state of birth, maybe his passport, and their last known destination, in particular of Khalid al-Midhar, was the Marriott Hotel, New York. The detail about why they're important and why they're evil is not given. And it was too late, and they weren't found.
The hijackers are already moving into their final positions.
About a week out, September 4th, September 5th, started to see some movement of the hijacking teams to their departure cities. Most of them arrived 2 or 3 days prior and then stayed in those cities.
The Flight 77 hijackers made their way to Maryland, to a hotel closer to Dulles Airport near Washington, D.C. Flight 93 hijackers moved closer to Newark Airport in New Jersey. And the Flight 175 and 11 teams relocate up to Boston. The morning of 9/11, the hijackers departed their hotels where they were staying to go to their airports. They arrived, they checked in, and went through security like all the other passengers. The hijackers used box cutters to assist them in carrying out the attack on board the airplanes. In one instance, we believe that they slit the throat of a passenger sitting in front of them. That sort of shock and awe enabled them to then rush the cockpit and also take over the airplane.
On American Airlines Flight 11, Mohammed Atta makes a final announcement.
Nobody move, please. Going back to the airport. Don't try to make any stupid moves.
Khalid Sheikh Mohammed's impossible, dreadful plan is about to reach fruition.
Charlie for the priority message. Let's witness an airplane crash into the World Trade Center.
Say what?
The World Trade Center, tower number 1 is on fire. Just a huge explosion. Start relocating companies into the area.
I was at the Ronald Reagan building a few blocks from the White House giving a speech.
I was in the nation's capital, briefing a group of members of Congress about oceans issues.
I was in my office on the 7th floor of CIA headquarters. The TV was on all the time.
And as I go into my office, people are watching TV, and woof, the second plane hits.
This is not a movie. This is actually happening. And many of our friends, many of our colleagues, many people that we probably know, we're watching them dying.
United 93, that traffic to you is 1 o'clock, 12 miles eastbound 370.
On board United Airlines Flight 93, Ziad Jarrah and his accomplices stormed the cockpit. Jarrah makes an announcement to the passengers.
Keep remaining sitting. We have a ball aboard.
I immediately jumped into a cab, and as we were driving away from Capitol Hill, the news came across that a plane had struck the Pentagon.
A plane crashed into the Pentagon. All air traffic in the United States has been grounded.
So there was no question that America was under attack.
Shortly after Flight 77 slams into the Pentagon, passengers aboard Flight 93 launch a counterattack. Overwhelming their captors, the plane crashes into a field in rural Pennsylvania.
People trapped. Also, in building 2, 97th floor, we have 6 people trapped.
The hijackings send a shockwave around the world. But for those who have tracked Al-Qaeda for years, this is the attack they've been dreading.
Our reaction was, okay, that's it. That's what we've been waiting for. That's the attack.
All units be advised that the north tower is leaning. Move your operations north of the tower.
We knew that this was terrorism. We knew this was an attack. And we knew of only one organization that was capable and willing to do that, and that was Al-Qaeda.
Everything we had feared, everything we were worried about had just happened. The United States had crossed a threshold into a new era of terrorism.
Get out of the area, the second tower is about to collapse.
I got in the car and I started for New York. The only time I got stopped was Florida State Trooper pulled me over. I was doing like 95. And as we walked up to the car, he saw all my raid jackets hanging in the back, and he just looked at me. He goes, "You going to New York?" I said, "Yes." All he said was Godspeed.
Bashir drives through the night, arriving at dawn.
When I was a child, young child, I would take the subway into Manhattan and I would watch them build the Trade Center. And now I'm standing there, no more than 10 to 15 stories of rubble out of 110 stories. When you stood there and you saw the steel framework of the Trade Center being illuminated from behind, reaching for the sky that it no longer commanded, it was just absolutely devastating. The steel was so hot that our boots were melting. Basically, every 2 hours, we had to change boots and then go back in. It was just horrible, horrible work. I mean, because you knew you weren't going to find anybody alive.
While first responders sort through burning rubble, officials scramble to determine who is responsible. The answer comes the afternoon of the attack.
An analyst runs into us with the manifest of the plane that had hit the Pentagon. And on that manifest were those two names that we had been searching for, Al-Hamsi and Al-Mittar. And so that clinched it for us. Okay, this is the Al-Qaeda attack that we had been anticipating.
Al-Hazmi, Al-Madar, the two Al-Qaeda operatives from the Malaysia meeting. For over a year, members of the CIA had known of their arrival in the U.S. without raising an alarm.
As many as 50 people in the CIA had known for over a year that there were two Al-Qaeda terrorist operatives in the United States, and they had not informed me, and they had not informed the FBI.
It is seen as one of the great intelligence disasters in American history.
Well, it was a failure. It was a collective failure. The information wasn't missed. It just wasn't acted upon the right way.
The FBI should have been notified. If the FBI had known about the guys coming from Malaysia landing in LA, we would have followed them. And maybe would have arrested them or disrupted them. The 9/11 attack did not have to happen. I can't get it out of my head that it didn't have to happen. This is why I wake up at night. This is why I think about it all the time. My heart is permanently broken.
The CIA's own Inspector General concluded in a 2014 report that at least 50 people knew about the hijackers' arrival and didn't share it. But CIA officials insist that they didn't deliberately withhold anything from the FBI.
Back then, it was a different time, different priorities, different policy machinery. Across the intelligence community as a whole, there was not the same atmosphere of sharing that developed after 9/11. Were we as good as we could have been? No. Were we as bad as everyone thinks we were? No.
This information should have been released sooner than it was. Our people did it as hard and as fast as they could. This idea that we were trying to, hide information is nonsense.
Unbearable questions still divide the people who were there. Why was that FBI cable initially blocked? And why did it take the CIA agents who knew that al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi were in the U.S. so long to share that information with the FBI?
I believe that what happened was the CIA learned that there were 2 al-Qaeda operatives that had flown from Bangkok and were in Los Angeles at the time. I believe they saw that as an opportunity to approach them and see if they could develop them as intelligence sources. Probably violated the rules about what CIA can do. But more importantly, it took an enormous risk if it happened, because it risked allowing al-Qaeda operatives to be in the United States.
The CIA declined to comment on Richard Clarke's theory. But former FBI agent Mark Rossini shares Clarke's suspicions.
A group of people had a delusional belief that they could recruit somebody in a cell, and it got out of hand. And they kept the FBI purposely out of it because they didn't want the FBI interfering with their little fantasy James Bond operation. That's what happened.
There's a phenomenon called the Cassandra phenomenon. Cassandra was a mythical figure in Greece who was cursed by the gods to have the ability to see the future and see disasters and warn people about those disasters. But the curse was that she would never be believed.
In the web of warnings, of missed signals, of failures to imagine the unimaginable, there were those who saw glimmers of what was coming. But in the end, they couldn't put all the pieces together in time to prevent 9/11.
The frustrating part of this history is that we wouldn't have had to stop every attack al-Qaeda attempted, we just had to stop this one. This was an attack of unprecedented scale. This was the one that changed the world.
Everybody asked the question, how the hell could this happen? But having been on the inside, I think in many ways, the responsibility rests on all of us.
9/11 transformed the world, a seismic shift that laid the foundations of many of today's conflicts. The first rumblings of that change registered within hours of the attacks.
We started talking about retaliation. Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense, said, yeah, well, I suppose we have to bomb Afghanistan, but there aren't enough targets in Afghanistan. We need to blow up a lot of things, so we should bomb Iraq. It seemed mad.
I injected myself into it and said, we have no indication that there's an al-Qaeda threat from Iraq. But if we go after them, we probably will create an al-Qaeda threat within Iraq before it's over, because we'll be viewed again as the infidels from the West.
The president made his decision. First things first. We needed to do something about al-Qaeda in Afghanistan. That was the priority.
I'll never forget, a little bit later, Rumsfeld said, I heard what the president said, but I want you to continue to refine those plans for Iraq, and let's keep those alive. Let's don't let them die. You know, we've got to convince the president that we've got to go into Iraq and take out Saddam Hussein.
Donald Rumsfeld declined to comment. In October 2001, the United States invades Afghanistan.
On my orders, the United States military has begun strikes.
And you were looking at the attacks on terror targets in Afghanistan.
2 years later, George Bush's closest advisors finally start to see their plans for Iraq come to fruition.
Iraq was a problem. It had been a problem we had been working on since the end of the first Gulf War. We had to do something about Saddam Hussein. That was the decision the president made.
On March 20th, 2003, the U.S. invades Iraq.
The showdown with Saddam started last night.
Thousands of American, British, and Iraqi troops have launched a new operation.
Saddam Hussein is removed from power. But the Iraq War has far-reaching consequences. Over the course of a decade, it is estimated that nearly 200,000 lives are lost, most of them civilians. The Iraq War also leads to a major boost in al-Qaeda's recruitment efforts.
Al-Qaeda was a dying breed after 9/11. We destroyed the Central Command in Afghanistan. They were on the run. And then we invaded Iraq, and we gave Al-Qaeda a new life. On the eve of 9/11, bin Laden had 400 members who were pledged Qaeda operatives. Today we have thousands and thousands who adhere to the ideology of Osama bin Laden. More armies and more fighters than bin Laden ever dreamed of.
On March 1st, 2003, the U.S. does score a victory. Bin Laden's key lieutenant, the architect of the 9/11 plot, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, is finally captured in Pakistan.
He was literally caught in his sleep in Pakistan Saturday morning.
It's a milestone moment. But it comes too late for the men who tracked him around the world.
When I heard of his capture, I was very happy, but it was too late. If Frank and I were able to catch him, I think it's a good possibility 9/11 probably would not have happened.
You think about what we didn't do, what we didn't get, and how we didn't finish. I mean, what we're talking about really is my biggest failure.
I was hunting the guy that did this, and I didn't get him. My life has been forever changed. I don't know, I don't think normal is ever going to be in my vocabulary again.
Today, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed is imprisoned at Guantanamo Bay. He awaits trial. His victims await justice. In the American reckoning with 9/11, there was always going to be one last unavoidable mission.
Tonight, I can report to the American people and to the world that the United States has conducted an operation that killed Osama bin Laden, the leader of al-Qaeda.
I flipped on the news and sat there watching. As the president stepped down and they went to the background footage, I switched around to different stations. USA! USA! On one of them, they had footage of Osama bin Laden, and he was sitting in front of a map with a gun sitting behind him. And I realized I was looking at a picture of bin Laden sitting across from me in the interview where he declared this war.
فبفضل الله التفاعل مرضي جدا في العالم الإسلامي على مستوى جميع الشرائح وبخاصة.
We had avenged what we could by killing the man who ordered it. That had some meaning of its own to so many victims, to so many families. And I remember being so proud as an American. All the pieces had come together that night to end this chapter.
For some who were there, this book will never close.
People said, don't you want to go to the museum? Don't you want to go up and see? No, I could never, ever set foot in Manhattan again. It'll never happen. It's survivor's guilt. I mean, how could it be anything but? I'm not saying that I have it worse than anybody else. I mean, guys that worked there, guys that survived the collapse, not taking anything away, but I was hunting the guy that did this to you, and I didn't get him. So I just can't go back to the site. I got to stay as far away from there as possible.